Are you wondering, can your DNA results be incorrect? Well, today we're going to answer that question. Howdy, and welcome to Family History Fanatics, where we love helping you climb your tree and have fun along the way. If you're new to genetic genealogy, you probably have tons of questions. Be sure to check out the link in the description below for our free guide to the 5 most common questions we get about DNA. We all have DNA. In fact, 99.9% of our DNA is the same. So really simply, if you want to go by that, you don't even have to be tested and you already know what 99.9% of your DNA is, which in most cases, that's a perfect A, if not an A+. But I don't think that's what you were thinking. You may have heard some people say, oh, I got my DNA tested, but the results are so wrong. It's nothing like what I am. Or, hey, if I get this tested, which company is the most accurate? Both of those questions tend to think that your DNA results can be incorrect. But I think what is the problem is most people who are asking that question are asking the wrong question. Let's look at 2 ways that our DNA results are correct or incorrect. First way is the actual raw data. Our DNA is made up of 3 billion letters, or really 3 billion A, C, T's, or G's. That's not all the letters of the alphabet, just those 4. So in 3 billion places, we have an A, a T, a C, or a G. And when we're doing a DNA test, what they're looking at is they're looking at about 500,000 of those places. So they have 500,000 chances to get something wrong. Is something going to go wrong there? Yeah. Does it happen a lot? No, not at all. In fact, I've compared my DNA that's been tested between multiple different companies, and from just a simple processing error. In other words, let's say 3 of the companies say that I'm an A in this location, and a 4th company says I'm a C in this location. Just by looking at those, what I found is that less than 0.5% of any time that I'm looking at the same location, the DNA testing companies are going to get it wrong. Less than 0.5%. So that's still 99.5% correct on what they're testing. And remember, they already know what the other 99.9% is. So you're looking at 99.9995%. That's pretty accurate. So the raw data, by and large, is not incorrect. Usually, if there is a major error when you're testing, either there's not enough DNA or something with the sample goes wrong in the processing, what the company will do is they'll send you an email and tell you that, hey, we had a problem with the processing. We'd like you to take another test so that there's another sample. When you do that, then they're going to process that sample. Now, the reason why they can be so accurate is because they're actually running lots of tests over and over. So they're not just looking at a letter once. They're not just looking at that location once. They're looking at that location several times and analyzing it each time. And if it's coming up with the same letter every time, then they're confident to say that it is that letter. In some cases, they may have it where sometimes it's coming up this letter, other times it's coming up with this other letter, and they'll say that, okay, this is a no call. In other words, we're not going to tell you what that letter is because for whatever reason, we just can't get that information right. The amount of no calls that you have in your DNA is also less than that 0.5%. There's just not that many of them. So overall, when you get your results, that raw data, 99% of it is going to be the exact same every single time you test, because that's really around the accuracy of these tests. So if you believe that 99% is not good enough, then yes, you can say that your DNA test is incorrect. However, I'm of the opinion that a 99% is more than an A. I'm going to say that it is correct. Now, the next part of DNA testing is really where people are talking about when they're asking this question. And that has to do with ethnicity results, it has to do with your matches, and it has to do with any medical information. So 3 different areas that companies may tell you some information about. So let's look at each one of those. First off, with your ethnicity results. One thing to always remember is that the companies will tell you these are ethnicity estimates. It is not definitive. And what these estimates indicate is where some of your ancestry may have been. It is not a guarantee that your ancestry is from there. Now, most of the ethnicity results are great at the continental level and even at some of the sub-regional levels. There's certain populations like Ashkenazi Jews who have had a community that is separate from most of the others, and so their DNA has remained very separate from the communities around them, and so they can actually pull out what DNA might be Ashkenazi Jewish. On the other hand, most of the companies will also drill down to even smaller and smaller levels. One of the problems with this is that there has been a lot of immigration and moving over the last centuries. And so just because today's people and maybe the people of an area have lived there for a couple of hundred years doesn't mean that they lived there 300 years ago or 400 years ago or 500 years ago for that matter. DNA is great for ethnicity at the continental level. Yes, that is correct. But it's really uncertain the smaller down you get. And so in some places when you're talking about a certain county or a certain town, I wouldn't change my birth certificate or anything like that. I wouldn't change who I think I am because of that. Next is the match data, the people that you match with. This also has there's some and then there's some not. So let's talk about the some. Some of these are definite matches, people that you share DNA with, particularly your close relatives. So second cousins, first cousins, brothers, sisters, half siblings, anything like that, you share DNA with for sure. And therefore, you are going to show up on their match list and they're going to show up on your match list. Now, some people think that they're incorrect because some of these known second cousins or first cousins don't show up. It probably means that there was something in the family that happened and there's a father or a mother that's not really the father or the mother, and that's who you thought you were related through. But because they're not showing up as being related to you, you're not really related. And that's just at the close relationship level. Now, once you get to third cousins, you don't share DNA with all of them. And the further out you go, the less of that group of people you share DNA with. So for instance, third cousins, you share about 90%. You share DNA with 90% of your third cousins. But once you get to sixth cousins, it's 5%. Not that much at all. So only 5% of your sixth cousins do you share DNA with, which means there's a lot of people that you're related to that you don't share any DNA with. The other thing that you will find on your match list is you're going to find there's some people that you just can't figure out a connection to. Now, these people usually share, 10 or 12, maybe 15. I've seen as much as 20, 25 centimorgans, which still is not a lot. But there's a percentage of these people that you don't have a genealogical relationship with. In other words, you're not really related within the last 10 years. Yeah, you might be related 1,000 or last 10 generations, not 10 years, last 10 generations. You might be related 1,000 years ago, but not in any time that you're going to be able to figure out from a genealogical perspective. These are false matches. Now, the smaller amount of DNA that you share with somebody, the greater likelihood that they are a false match. So for instance, at around 7 centimorgans, 50% of your matches are false matches. In other words, you're not going to be able to find any way that you're related because it is just too far back. As you go down to something like 3 centimorgans, it's more than 90% of your matches are false matches. Whereas up to about 13 or 14 centimorgans around there, you're only looking at about 2% of your matches are false matches. Now, like I said, I have seen some instances where 20 to 25 centimorgans, there was a false match. But I'm, still curious about that because it might just be a line that they haven't figured out everything with. So when you're looking at your match data, close relatives are correct. Distant relatives, there's some percentage of them that are incorrect. They're false matches. And you're just not going to know that from your own single test. You actually have to have lots of different people in your close relative family to determine whether or not that's a false match or not. So the third area then is medical or health information. There's, as with all things DNA, it's like there's 2 parts to everything, or 3 parts. In this case, we have certain things that are 100% dependent on our DNA. For instance, our hair color, our eye color, what our blood type is, A, B, or O. All these things are dependent sometimes on a single gene of DNA, or they are dependent on a few of these genes, a few of these places that have differences. But these are dictated by your DNA. On the other hand, there are lots of things like your susceptibility to certain kinds of cancer or ability to taste different things that have a DNA component, but there's also some other things that are going on that scientists have just not figured out completely, or they're completely outside of DNA. For instance, environmental factors. In this case, just because you have a propensity to, let's say, obesity or a propensity to breast cancer doesn't mean that you're 100% going to get it. Likewise, just because you don't have this propensity or you don't have the genes for this also doesn't mean you're not going to get any of these diseases or conditions. Because there's an interaction with all these different things going on, really the best that scientists can do is tell you a percentage of how much your genetics affects it. It doesn't tell you whether you're going to have it necessarily. So again, when we're talking about medical and health information, some things, yes, whatever your DNA reports is correct. And for other things, it might be incorrect, but it's not because of any kind of processing. It's just because there's so many different factors that are going on. So in the end, when we're talking about whether or not our DNA test is correct, we need to understand what aspect of it we're talking about. Now, if you'd like to learn more about redheads, you can watch this video right here. But if you want to learn more about something else related to DNA, then check out this other video down below.